The ground of Tyrell heaved beneath Serenya's knees, the planet's crust groaning like a dying beast. Columns of molten rock speared into the sky, painting the churning black clouds in shades of hellish red. Above it all, the heavens themselves seemed torn apart, ribbons of space unraveling under the pull of a colossal vortex. The maw of Erithus Prime drank in everything, stone, fire, and the screaming remains of cities that had once been whole. Her armor was split and charred, her blood seeping in slow rivulets down her arms. The air tasted of ash and iron, but she didn't notice. All she could see was him. "Sir!" Ka lay sprawled in the shadow of a shattered spire, his once towering frame broken. His dark carapace cracked open to reveal a faint, burning core. This was the alien warlord who had led the slaughter of her clan, the monster who had left her world in ruins long before Erithus Prime had come. Yet now he was reduced to labored breaths, each exhale clouded with black mist that drifted away into the dying wind. Serenya's pulse hammered in her ears as she staggered toward him, boots sinking into molten dust. "Ing!" he rasped, his voice a guttural scrape, but then he forced the words out in her tongue. "You want revenge? You want the power to tear that thing apart?" Her fists tightened, the urge to drive a blade through his throat overwhelming. "You think I would trust the word of the butcher who slaughtered my blood?" Her voice was raw, carrying every ghost that had ever whispered in her sleep. His mandibles twitched in what might have been a cruel smile. "Do you have another choice?" The air between them vibrated faintly, the resonance of some deeper truth she didn't want to acknowledge. A chunk of the sky fell behind them, a city fragment burning through the atmosphere before vanishing into the vortex. The scream of wind and rending stone made her teeth ache. Serenya glanced upward. Erithus was closer now, a cyclone of black light, its center a hunger older than stars. She could feel it in her marrow, the way it pulled, the way it reached for her soul as much as her body. "Zer!" Ka's taloned hand shifted with agonizing slowness, revealing the object he clutched against his chest. A crystalline sphere, black as obsidian at its core, but shot through with veins of molten red that pulsed like a heartbeat. It radiated a heat that burned her face even through the chaos around them. "This," he hissed, "is my essence, my victories, my defeats, my curse." Serenya's breath caught. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to spit in his face and let him rot. But the vortex was widening, the horizon curling inward as if the planet itself was folding into nothing. She imagined Erithus devouring another world, another people, another set of children who would never grow up. Her own clan's screams rose unbidden in her mind. "Why?" she demanded, her voice low. His gaze bored into hers. "Because if you die now, it dies laughing." A cough racked him, spraying dark ichor that hissed as it hit the molten ground. "Because my war is over, but yours is just beginning." For a heartbeat, they simply stared at each other, the last warrior of a dead clan and the last commander of a fallen. Armada, both brought to ruin by the same cosmic predator. The ground shook violently, fissures splitting open around them, and the stench of vaporized stone filled the air. Her voice was barely a whisper. "What will it do to me?" "It will make you strong enough to break a planet," he said, eyes narrowing. "But strength always takes more than it gives." Something in her chest clenched, but she reached for the crystal. It was heavier than it looked, its surface alive under her fingertips, a slow pulse that matched the thud of her heart. The instant her skin made full contact, the heat flared white-hot, and a shockwave of alien memories smashed into her mind. She was standing in the body of Zir Ka, looking through his eyes as he cleaved through fleets above worlds she had never known. She felt the cold satisfaction of victory, the bitterness of loss when his home was consumed, desperate rage as he fought Erithus across dying suns. She heard the screams of thousands, not as a witness, but as the cause. The weight of every death pressed down on her until her knees buckled. "No!" she gasped, clutching at her head, but the images kept coming, stars bending under weapons that could tear reality. Storm fronts of cosmic fire curling around his ships, the roar of black holes collapsing under controlled detonations. And always, always the shadow of Erithus in the distance, feeding, growing, watching. "Accept it!" Zir Ka's voice thundered inside her skull. "Accept me, or we'd both die here." Her hands trembled as the crystal melted into her flesh, tendrils of living light threading through her veins. Pain tore through her muscles, setting every nerve alight. She screamed, her voice ripped away by the howl of the collapsing atmosphere. Above them, the vortex flared. The pull grew stronger, dragging stones, bodies, and burning wreckage toward its center. The broken spire behind Zir Ka toppled, vanishing into the cyclone without a sound. Serenia felt her boots lose purchase as the force lifted her from the ground. She clawed her way forward, fingers digging into scorched soil, but the world tilted around her, the horizon folding in half. The edges of her vision bled red as something deep inside her awoke. She glanced at her hand and froze. Her skin was splitting, glowing fissures revealing the molten current beneath. Her bones gleamed like black steel, veins of magma twisting through them. The light spread up her arms, across her chest, until she felt less like a woman and more like a weapon. "Zir!" Kaa's voice was quieter now, almost satisfied. "Now, hunt it!" The last thing she saw before the darkness swallowed her was Erithus Prime's immense silhouette, its spiral form blotting out the stars and the faint reflection of her new alien eyes staring back from the molten glow of her hands. She did not know she had just saved herself or ended the last trace of who she had been. The silence of deep space was never truly silent for Serenia. In the cockpit of her lone strike craft, the hum of the engines was a low, constant growl beneath the higher whine of the weapons capacitors, a reminder that everything she touched these days was meant for war. Outside, the stars were scattered jewels against the black, beautiful and indifferent, same way they had been the night her home burned. She could still see it. Rin Kara, her world, once a sphere of shimmering blue and gold, now nothing but dust scattered through the void. Erithus Prime had arrived without warning, a spiral of devouring shadow, and her people had fought until their ships cracked and their cities fell inward. The Red Star clan, warriors who had defended the system for centuries, had been erased in hours. All but one. Serenia had lived only because she had been sealed away in an underground military cache on a distant moon. During the first wave, the others called it fate when they found her. She called it failure. Every waking hour since, the thought had festered. She had been absent when her clan had made their final stand. She had not died beside them. That debt could only be paid one way, through the complete destruction of the thing that had taken them. Her reflection in the cockpit glass was a stranger's. Dark hair bound tight, eyes sharp as broken obsidian, skin marked by faint glowing traces of the alien essence now coiled in her blood. The warlord Zerkar's final gift or curse had changed her in ways she had yet to understand. Sometimes, in the quiet, she could hear him, feel his memories pressing at the edges of her own, but she pushed them back. His power was a weapon, and she would use it until nothing remained of Erithus Prime. She had been a commander once before the fall, trained in the rigid discipline of her people. Orders were law, emotion was to be controlled, the mission always came first. That discipline still lived in her, but it was wrapped now around something far hotter and more dangerous than duty. Rage was a constant ember beneath her ribs. The cold precision of a soldier kept it in check most of the time. Her comm panel flickered, pulling her from the past. A message from a contact in the fringe systems, sightings of Erithus near the Nivora cluster. The words were enough to quicken her pulse. Erithus had been moving slowly for years, feeding in distant, uninhabited sectors. But Nivora was different. Rich trade lanes, civilian colonies, a place where billions lived unaware of the predator drawing closer. If she moved now, she could intercept. If she waited, there would be another Rinkara to mourn. The thought of it tightened her jaw. She keyed in new coordinates without hesitation. The craft's navigation computer plotting a series of jumps that would take her into the heart of Nivora space. The alien energy in her veins responded instinctively, her senses sharpening, a strange anticipation crawling along her spine. It was as if the essence inside her knew the hunt had begun. As the first jump initiated, memory rose unbidden. Her last conversation with Captain Varick, the closest thing she had to family after the fall. They had stood on the observation deck of a refugee ship, watching the slow spin of a shattered moon. "Serenia," he had said quietly, "revenge won't bring them back." She had met his gaze without flinching. "No, but it will make sure they didn't die for nothing." He had sighed, shaking his head, but he hadn't argued further. They both knew she would never stop. The strike craft shuddered back into normal space at the edge of Nivora's outermost system. Ahead lay a cold expanse of asteroid fields and mining outposts, the first line of habitation before the rich inner worlds. She scanned for signs, energy fluctuations, gravitational distortions, anything that might signal Erithus's approach. The alien essence inside her pulsed once, a hot spark in her chest, and she found herself turning the ship toward a patch of empty darkness that was not quite empty. That was the danger of carrying Zirke's power. It sharpened her senses beyond human limits, but it also carried his instincts, his way of reading the battlefield, his hunger. She didn't know if she was detecting Erithus or some remnant of the warlord's will was pulling her forward. Either way, she couldn't ignore it. Her fingers danced over the controls, bringing the ship into a stealth approach. As she moved closer, faint ripples in space-time bled across her sensors, like the aftermath of something massive having passed through. She knew those patterns. She had seen them in Rin Kara's final moments, in every fragment of Zirka's memories. Erithis was near. She set the ship into orbit around a small mining moon, its surface pitted and lifeless, perfect for concealment. From here, she could monitor the cluster's traffic, watch for the subtle signs of gravitational draw that marked Erethis's feeding pattern. Days might pass before the entity revealed itself, but Serenia could wait. She had waited years. In the stillness of the moon's shadow, she let herself close her eyes. Faces came to her, her mother's steady hands adjusting her armor before a ceremony, her brother's laughter after a training match, the solemn council chambers where she had once pledged to protect their people. They were ghosts, but they were hers, and they would walk with her into whatever came next. When she opened her eyes, the alien glow in them was brighter. Her hands curled into fists on the controls. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, Erithus Prime was moving, and she would be there to meet it. Whether she survived that meeting no longer mattered. What mattered was that when it ended, either she or the thing that had devoured her world would be gone forever. The docking clamps bit into the hull of Serenia's strike craft with a metallic groan, and the artificial gravity of Kor's End pressed down on her as she stepped onto the station's pitted steel deck. The air here smelled of machine oil, stale recycled oxygen, and the faint tang of fear, always fear, on the outer rim. Traders, mercenaries, and refugees moved like currents in a river, each with their own cargo, their own secrets, their own desperation. Kor's End was a place where news traveled faster than ships, and she had come for one piece of news in particular. It didn't take long to find it. The moment she stepped into the main concourse, she caught fragments of conversation, voices pitched low but edged with panic. 12 minutes, gone, not a trace left. It wasn't raiders, I'm telling you, it was something else. I saw the energy readouts. No weapon we have could do that. The words were like ice water down her spine. A whole trade world erased in less time than it took to run a diagnostic sweep. Only one thing left that kind of void. Erithus Prime had been here. She pushed deeper into the crowd, her presence drawing glances. The faint glow in her eyes, the way she carried herself, people knew not to block her path. She was halfway to the data exchange when a voice stopped her. "You've got his stink on you." She turned. The man leaning against the wall was thin, grease-streaked, with a mane of unkempt blonde hair and eyes, the pale gray of old steel. His hands were stained with lubricant, and the faint burn marks on his forearms spoke of someone who'd spent too long around unstable engines. "Do I know you?" she asked flatly. "No," he said, pushing off the wall. "But I knew him." Her pulse quickened, though her expression didn't change. "Zaire Ka," the man nodded. "Name's Arban. I was his prisoner for 3 years. Worked on his warships, kept them flying. You carry something of him. And I don't mean a trophy." She felt the weight of his gaze, sharp and invasive. "He gave me power. I control it." Arvan's mouth twisted into something between a grimace and a laugh. "You don't understand. He didn't give you power. He planted himself inside you. A seed, a copy. Call it what you want, but it's him, and it's growing." Serenia took a step closer, her shadow falling across him. "I've resisted worse than his whispers." "Have you?" Arvan's voice dropped, his words precise now. "Because one day you'll hear him tell you that killing everyone in the room is the right thing to do, and it'll make perfect sense. That's how it starts. You think it's you making the choice." She stared at him, weighing his words, feeling the faint, unwelcome shiver in her blood. Behind her thoughts, deep and quiet, there was always the pulse. Zir, Ka's essence, patient and waiting. She forced it down. "I'm not him." Arvan didn't argue. He just gave her a look that said he'd seen too many people say the same thing before. The station's loudspeakers cracked, announcing an incident on the east docking ring. Instinct pushed her forward before she even thought. Trouble meant instability, and instability could hide information. She rounded a corner into chaos. A gang of armed scavengers had stormed the market level, their armor pieced together from mismatched plates, their weapons barking bright bursts into the air to drive civilians back. One of them spotted her and laughed. "Look what we've got here. Some rim soldier playing hero." He leveled his rifle. The pulse inside her surged. She moved before the shot came, crossing the space between them in a blur. Her hand clamped around his wrist, the metal of his armor creaking under her grip. With a single squeeze, she felt the reinforced plating snap like brittle bone. The man screamed, his weapon clattering to the deck. Another lunged at her from behind, and she turned, catching his strike mid-swing. Her other hand found his chest plate, fingers curling through the steel. Ow! The alien heat roared up her arms, and with a twist, the entire section of armor crumpled inward, sending him sprawling. Around her, the gang faltered. None dared move closer. She was breathing hard now, the glow in her veins bright enough to paint the walls red. The essence inside her whispered approval, warm and intoxicating. Yes, this is what we are. Her gaze swept the room, and that was when she saw the civilians pressed into corners, eyes wide, faces pale. They weren't looking at the scavengers anymore. They were looking at her, and they were afraid. The heat in her blood cooled into something heavy. She released her grip on the scavenger's armor and stepped back, the gang scattering under the weight of her stare. She let them run. When she turned, Arvin was there in the doorway, arms folded. He didn't smile, didn't gloat. He just said, "Now you've seen it." Her jaw clenched. She brushed past him without a word, but his voice followed her down the corridor. "It's not the killing that will scare you, Serenia. It's the day you stop caring who you kill." His words stuck with her long after she left the market level, a shadow at the edge of every thought. She told herself it was nonsense. She told herself she was in control. But deep inside, beneath the discipline and the rage, there was a tiny, undeniable truth. For a moment back there, the killing had felt good. The warning came in fragments of static and panicked voices over the comms, each report worse than the last. A mining colony on the ice moon. Varela 9 had gone silent, and orbital surveillance showed only flashes of white steam and the jagged shadows of something moving on the surface. Serenia's ship cut through the void, engines burning cold and steady, her eyes locked on the blue-white sphere ahead. Varela 9 was nothing but frozen water and industrial rigs, a place no one visited unless they had to. But its location, right on the outer curve of Navora's trade lanes, made it a perfect feeding ground for Erithus' servants. Her senses confirmed it the moment she entered low orbit. Seismic disturbances too precise to be natural. Heat blooms that shouldn't exist on a moon of solid ice. And one massive reading at the center of it all. She knew the signature. Sentinel Maw. She'd seen it once before. In Zerka's memories. A living siege engine bred for one purpose. To break fortifications and drag survivors toward the void. This wasn't random slaughter. Erithus had sent its hound to soften the colony before feeding. She landed on the outskirts, the airlock opening to a razor wind that cut through her armor's seals. The ground crunched under her boots, the ice a pale mirror for the violet glow of the sky where Varela's gas giant hung like a bruised moon. In the distance she heard it, a deep pulsing thud that came in rhythm like the heartbeat of a world. The colony was already half collapsed. Drilling towers lay toppled, their steel frames twisted into black sculptures against the ice. Steam poured from fissures where coolant systems had ruptured. Through the haze she saw movement, a hulking silhouette, its shape distorted by the shimmering heat it carried. Sentinel Maw stood on 4 massive limbs, its head a jagged crown of chitin, its eyes pits of molten amber. Every step it took melted the ice beneath it, sending rivers toward the colony's lower levels. She didn't hesitate. Her rifle came up, bolts of concentrated plasma slamming into its armored flank. The creature turned, its roar rolling across the plain, shaking frost from the nearby structures. It charged, ice shattering under its bulk, and Serenia's instinct screamed for her to move. She dove aside, the ground where she'd stood erupting in a geyser of boiling water as its clawed forelimbs struck home. "Too strong for human weapons," Zerkar's voice whispered in her skull, heavy and cold. "Call on me. Break it." She clenched her teeth, ignoring the whisper as she vaulted onto a nearby storage tower, firing down into the beast's exposed joints. But Sentinel Maw was faster than she'd expected. Its tail swept in a wide arc, smashing through the tower's base. She hit the ice hard, her breath leaving her in a cloud. The world tilted, the ice beneath her groaning as cracks spited out from the impact. Civilians were trapped inside the main habitat dome just beyond the beast. She could see them through the transparent walls, hundreds pressed together, their faces pale with fear. The maw was tearing its way toward them, each step bringing it closer to shattering the dome and flooding the shelter with superheated steam. She had seconds to decide. The rifle wasn't enough. The creature wouldn't stop until it had ripped every living thing from the colony's heart. The alien heat inside her stirred, an ember flaring into fire. Her hands began to glow faintly, her breath coming faster as she felt Zerka's presence lean closer. "You see it now," he murmured. "Every victory demands blood." "Not theirs," she hissed aloud, rising to her feet. "Blood is blood," he countered. "The ice will claim them, or you will. The maw cannot be felled without the fire." Her pulse thundered in her ears. She could feel the energy gathering, molten currents racing through her veins, her muscles tensing with impossible strength. The sky seemed to darken, the air itself warping around her as she released it. She hit the ice running, every step leaving scorched craters in her wake. The Ma turned to face her, its roar meeting hers in a collision of sound. She drove her fist into the ice at its feet, the impact sending a shockwave that split the glacier beneath them. Steam burst upward as the moon's subterranean ocean vented into the frigid air. The temperature swung violently, frost flash melting into clouds so dense she could barely see. She didn't stop. Her hands became weapons of molten light, striking at the Ma's legs, severing tendons and shattering chitin. The beast fell to one knee, bellowing, its massive tail thrashing wildly. She leapt onto its back, driving her glowing fists deep into the plates that shielded its core. With a final surge, she unleashed everything, the alien power roaring out of her in a torrent that lit the sky. The ice beneath them exploded. Superheated water became a wall of steam, sweeping outward in every direction. Structures collapsed under the force, the habitat dome shattered inward, the protective glass curling and melting in the blast. The screams of the trapped civilians cut through the roar, then were swallowed by silence. When the steam began to clear, Sentinel Ma lay in pieces, its molten eyes dim. Serenia stood amid the wreckage, her armor hissing as ice cooled it. Her breath was ragged, her limbs trembling from the drain of power. Around her, the colony was gone. The buildings were blackened skeletons, the ground littered with debris. And the bodies, so many bodies! She fell to her knees, the alien heat inside her dimming to a sickly ember. "No," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I was trying to save them." "You did." "Zir," Kay's voice said, smooth and untroubled. "You saved them from a worse death." She shook her head, bile rising in her throat. "This wasn't the way. There is no other way. This is what victory looks like." Her fists clenched, the glow fading from her veins. For the first time since she had taken his essence, she felt something deeper than rage. Doubt. A cold, gnawing doubt that maybe every time she called on this power, she stepped closer to becoming what she swore to destroy. The wind howled over the broken ice, carrying with it the smell of steam and ash. Somewhere above, Erithus Prime moved on, indifferent, already seeking its next feast. Serenia rose slowly, the weight of the dead heavy on her shoulders. This was only the first battle, and already she wondered if she could survive the war without losing herself entirely. The void was not empty here. It twisted, the stars bent at impossible angles, their light smeared into streaks as if space itself were melting. Serenia's ship emerged from hyperspace into the warped region, alarm shrieking as the hull groaned under gravitational stress. Her senses struggled to define the anomaly ahead, feeding her flickering, contradictory images until, at last, the truth coalesced in the viewport. Erithus Prime. It was not a creature in the way mortals understood creatures. It was a storm, a towering spiral of black light, its core a swirling absence that devoured everything it touched. Around it, debris hung in a grotesque orbit, shattered moons, fractured asteroids, the skeletal remains of ships caught and stripped bare. With each slow turn of its form, it drew in another fragment, crushing it to nothing in silence. Serenia's breath caught, her fingers tightening around the controls. The alien essence within her pulsed hard, a molten surge in her veins, and she felt Zirkar's presence rise like a shadow behind her thoughts. "Now you see the beast for what it is," his voice murmured, thick with old rage. "And you know why it must be ended." She said nothing. Words were too small for the weight in her chest. Instead, she disengaged the autopilot and pushed the ship forward, into the pull of the vortex. Her bones thrummed as the fabric of space stretched around her, every nerve screaming that she had crossed into a place where the universe's laws no longer held. Then it spoke, not through sound, through thought, through a pressure that pressed down on her mind until she could hardly breathe. "You carry the blood of one who was mine." The voice was vast, ancient, echoing in 1,000 harmonics. "Sir, sir, Ka's mark burns in you, his hunger, his defiance." Her lips curled. "You will die like he did." The vortex slowed, the great spiral of Erithus shifting, as though tilting an invisible head. "If you kill me, you will become me." The words slid into her mind like cold metal. She tried to shake them off. "I am not yours. Every drop of his essence carries my design. The seed was planted long before you touched it. It will bloom when you spill my core across the stars." "Zuh!" Ka's voice surged in answer, coiling hot and sharp. "Lies. It fears you. Strike now." The two voices collided in her head, burning and freezing her thoughts at once. She gritted her teeth, forcing focus. "If you're trying to make me hesitate, it's not working." "Then look," Erithus said. The black light parted like a curtain, revealing a distant star system within the warped space. Her senses registered 9 inhabited worlds, trade routes glowing with the faint signatures of civilian traffic. These are the next to fall. If you turn away now, they will live for decades. If you fight me here, you will take them in days. Her hands froze above the controls. She could feel Zierka pushing, urging her to dive, to burn, to tear the spiral apart. But beneath that heat was a quieter whisper, a dangerous curiosity. What if Erithus was right? What if unleashing all of Zierka's power didn't just kill the entity, but replaced it? She forced herself to think tactically. To kill Erithus, she would have to release everything she had, let the alien core inside her open fully. That meant opening herself to Zierka, to the part of him she had kept caged in the back of her mind since their union. And if she did, her heart pounded. Billions will die if I leave you. Billions will die if you stay, Erithus replied almost gently. The form changes. The hunger does not. You can't! She cut herself off, because she could feel Zierka laughing inside her, the sound dry and cold. It is afraid of you because it knows you can win. All predators lie when they are cornered. This is the moment, Serenia. You have trained for nothing else. The ship shuddered as a wave of gravitational force slammed into it. Erithus was no longer waiting. Tendrils of black light uncoiled from its spiral, reaching for her. They were not solid things, more like rivers of absence, flowing against the current of the universe. Where they touched space, the stars vanished. Her HUD lit up red as the first tendril wrapped around her ship. Hull integrity dropped by 10% in seconds. She fired the main thrusters, but it was like trying to outrun a tide. The essence inside her burned hotter, flooding her limbs, her vision tinged with crimson light. She knew the choice was now. Break free by unleashing everything, or cut power, eject, and let the current drag her into Erithus' core. Retreat and watch the next system die. Do it, sire. Ka's voice pressed, urgent now. Let me in. Together we can crush it. You mean together we can become it, she spat. Better to be the predator than the prey. The black tendril constricted, the ship's frame groaning. Warning klaxons screamed. She felt the alien fire in her veins reaching for the controls, for the weapons, for her very thoughts. It would be so easy. Just stop resisting, and the power would surge through her like a star-going nova. She could feel the shape of the strike in her mind already, a blast that would tear Erithus' spiral apart, scattering its essence into the void. And in the same instant she saw the cost, her hands no longer her own. Her eyes burning with a light that wasn't human, her voice speaking in a chorus that included Zierka's. Erithus' voice came again, lower now, almost intimate. You believe you are here to save, but your every step brings you closer to replacing me. You cannot kill hunger, you can only inherit it. Her grip tightened on the control yoke, sweat beading along her hairline. She thought of Rin, Kara, of the ash that had been her people, of the hundreds she'd already failed to save on Varela 9. She thought of what she'd felt in that moment, the rush, the power, the terrible satisfaction. She had come to kill Erithus. She might leave as its heir. The tendril began to pull her ship into the core. The stars beyond vanished completely. Every instinct screamed at her to act, to unleash, to end this. But instincts were what had driven her into the blast that killed the colonists. Instincts were what Zierka had fed her since the beginning. Her jaw locked. Not like this. She cut the main power, forcing the ship into a dead drift. The tendril's pull increased, dragging her toward the center, but without resistance. It loosened fractionally, like a predator confused by prey that refused to run. Using the brief slack, she triggered the emergency detachment of the cockpit module, letting the rest of the craft spiral into the abyss. She floated in the escape pod, hidden by debris, Erithus' voice fading as the distance grew. You can't run forever. Maybe not, she whispered, but I can choose when I fight. The black light receded into the warped distance. Her hands shook, the ember of Zierka's power still smoldering, waiting. She had spared the billions in that nearby system this time. But the war wasn't over, and she didn't know how many more choices like this she could survive without losing herself completely. The stars trembled. Serenia stood in the open cradle of her ship's stripped-down weapons platform, every nerve alight with the heat of Zierka's essence. Around her, the warped space writhed like a living thing, Erithus' prime spiral of black light closing in. She had run before, she had hesitated, not this time. The weight of every face she had failed to save. Rin, Kara, Varela, 9, countless others, pressed into her bones until there was no room for doubt. Now, Kaa's voice roared inside her, molten and triumphant. "Let me in, all of me." Her hands clenched around the control grips. "This ends here." The restraints disengaged, and she stepped forward, her body a conduit for a power no human should bear. The glow under her skin flared into brilliance, veins of molten red racing up her arms, across her chest, into her eyes. Erith's tendrils lashed out, black rivers of nothingness seeking to smother her light. But each strike only fed the inferno rising within her. She felt her own mind stretched to its limit as Zirkar's consciousness flooded in, not as a whisper now, but as a roar that shook her to the marrow. Memories that were not hers blazed through her vision, entire fleets burning, worlds cracked open. The cold satisfaction of victory bought in blood. She wanted to turn away, to shut him out, but the power was indivisible from the presence. Her voice tore free, a fusion of hers and his, echoing across the void. "Erithis!" The entity's spiral convulsed, its black light folding inward as if bracing for impact. "You cannot kill hunger," its voice pressed against her mind. "I can starve you," she spat. The release was instant and absolute. The alien energy surged outward in a torrent, a wave of incandescent force that tore through Erithis' form. Space warped violently as the spiral unraveled, its tendrils shredding into strands of ash and shadow. The explosion bloomed in silence, a supernova of red and gold that painted the entire star system in light brighter than any sun. Planets turned to silhouettes, asteroids casting long shadows across their own orbits. Her senses were aflame. She could feel the molecular bonds of Erithis' essence snapping, its ancient will scattering into the void. It was dying, truly dying, and yet in its final collapse she felt something else, a tether, a pull inward, as though part of her were being drawn into the void with it. Then she saw it, her left hand, glowing brighter than the rest, its skin splitting open in jagged seams to reveal not flesh but chitin and molten metal beneath. Alien, not hers. Yes. Zirkar's voice was no longer roaring. It was satisfied, almost gentle. "This is what we are now." The last fragments of Erithis drifted away like burnt paper on a solar wind, and the warped gravity began to ease. But she didn't feel victorious. The light under her skin did not fade. She flexed her altered hand, feeling strength there that terrified her more than Erithis ever had. By the time she returned to inhabited space, word of Erithis' destruction had already spread ahead of her. The docking bay of the station at Jara Prime was filled with people traders, soldiers, refugees, all gathered to see the one who had ended the threat that haunted their skies for generations. The hatch opened, and Serenia stepped out, the crimson glow in her eyes casting faint halos on the deck. The crowd bowed their heads, some lowering themselves to one knee. She heard the murmurs, "The saviors, the last Red Star warriors, the one who destroyed Erithis." But beneath the reverence was something colder. No one met her gaze for long. Parents pulled their children closer. Men and women took unconscious steps back as she passed, the space around her widening. It wasn't her armor or her weapons they feared. It was the light, the faint, unnatural pulse in her eyes that spoke of something not entirely human. She walked through them in silence, feeling the weight of their awe and their dread in equal measure. This was what victory looked like. Alive, yes. Triumphant, yes. But alone. At the far end of the bay she paused, glancing at her altered hand before curling it into a fist. "Zir!" Kaa's voice lingered in her skull, no longer demanding, no longer coaxing, just present, like the slow beat of a second heart. "We have only begun." Serenia didn't answer. She stepped forward, the crowd parting around her, and kept walking until the murmurs faded into the hum of the station's machinery. She had killed Erithis, but somewhere in the quiet she knew she had brought something just as dangerous back with her. The war was over, but the silence it left behind was heavier than the roar of any battle. From her quarters aboard the station, Serenia watched the galaxy roll past through the wide observation glass, a slow dance of distant stars and drifting nebulae, untouched by the war that had consumed her life. Somewhere out there, Erithis was gone, its spiral of black light erased from existence. Worlds that would have been ash still turned under the warmth of their suns. Billions were alive because of her, and yet, as her reflection stared back from the glass, she found no comfort in the knowledge. The woman in the reflection was not the same one who had sworn to avenge Ryan Kara. Her eyes burned with a red glow that never faded now. Beneath her skin, faint seams of alien light traced her veins, pulsing to a rhythm that wasn't entirely hers. The left hand she kept hidden beneath a leather glove was no longer human at all. She had won the war, but she had carried a piece of the enemy home inside herself. News of Erithis' destruction had spread like wildfire. Across the core worlds and out into the rim, she was hailed as the savior of the galaxy, the last warrior of the Red Star clan who had destroyed an ancient horror. Monuments were being planned, songs were being written, and yet every time she walked through a crowd, she felt the way people drew back just slightly, as though some instinct warned them she was not entirely safe. They bowed, they thanked her, but their eyes held the same edge of caution she had seen in the seconds before, a fight. They sensed what she already knew, that the thing inside her was still alive, patient, waiting. She told herself she could control it, that she could keep Zerka's essence bound, use it only when needed. But she remembered Varela. 9. She remembered the rush of heat, the thrill that had come with crushing Sentinel Maw, and the terrible realization afterward that she hadn't wanted to stop. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard Zerka's voice in the background, no longer trying to dominate her, but weaving his words into the spaces between her thoughts. He never told her to kill now. He didn't have to. Standing in the quiet of the observation deck, she thought of the moments before the final battle, the choice she'd made to unleash everything. She had known the cost then, and she had accepted it. Perhaps that was what troubled her most. Not the transformation itself, but the fact that she had chosen it willingly. She had told herself it was for the galaxy, for the billions who would have died otherwise. And that was true. But there was another truth, darker and harder to face. She had wanted to win, no matter the price. The galaxy saw her as a hero. She saw herself as a warning. In the years to come, others would rise, warriors, leaders, dreamers, each facing their own Erithus. And some of them would have to choose between preserving themselves or destroying the enemy at any cost. She could not tell them what to choose. All she could do was leave them the truth she had learned too late. Mein ken la vie ken she la vie, she murmured to the empty room, the words tasting heavy on her tongue. It is a curse if you let it define you. Power had saved the galaxy, but it had also stripped away the woman she used to be. It had taken her laughter, her ability to stand among her own kind without feeling the distance. It had replaced her reflection with something alien. The paradox gnawed at her. She would make the same choice again if faced with the same threat. But she could no longer tell if that was heroism or corruption. Her thoughts drifted back to Rin, Kara, not the day it fell, but the days before. Markets filled with the smell of spiced airfood, the rhythmic clash of training blades in the courtyards, the calm faces of her people who believed the Red Star clan could protect them from anything. They had never seen Erithus coming. She had been their protector then, and she had failed. She had sworn it would never happen again. She had kept that promise, but the galaxy she protected now did not feel like hers anymore. A soft chime broke her thoughts. The station's command, AI, informed her that another delegation from the core worlds had arrived, requesting her presence for a formal commendation. She almost laughed. What would they see when she entered the chamber? Would they applaud the savior? Or would their eyes flicker to the faint glow beneath her skin, the subtle shift in her posture that no human soldier carried? Would they look past the medals and the speeches and see the truth that Erithus might be gone, but part of its shadow still walked among them? She turned from the window, the stars reflected in her eyes like shards of crimson glass. She would go, stand before them, let them speak their words and carve her name into their histories. But she would not let them forget the price, because somewhere, someday, someone else would be offered the same bargain she had been, and they needed to know what it cost. As she walked toward the lift, the question rose in her mind unbidden, the same one she'd carried since the moment she felt Erithus die beneath her hands. She could almost hear herself asking it to those who would come after, her voice steady, without judgment, but edged with the weight of experience. If saving the world meant living the rest of your life as a monster, would you do it?